They thought the storm had passed, that the damage they caused would stay buried, that the silence of the good was weakness, that the lies they wrapped themselves in would keep them warm forever. But what they never saw coming was time, because time does not forget. And karma does not lose addresses. It simply waits, silently, patiently. And now the hourglass has flipped. 2025 is not a year of vengeance. It is a reckoning, not with noise, not with chaos, but with consequences. The stage is set, the light is harsh, and every shadow that hid behind charm, power, or deception is about to be seen for what it truly is. This is the year karma stops knocking and starts walking in. The pendulum always swings back. They thought they could outrun gravity, that if they smiled wide enough, talked fast enough, stepped over enough people and called it ambition, they could outsmart the pull of justice itself. They moved through life like architects of illusion, sculpting realities that served them, never thinking that truth has a longer breath than deception. They mistook quiet for absence. They mistook stillness for weakness, and they believed that because nothing struck them immediately, nothing ever would. But time doesn't forget, and the universe is never late. It's precise. It doesn't respond with explosions or lightning bolts. It moves slowly, it watches, and when the time is right, it answers with exacting calm. That's what makes 2025 different. It's not just another year on the calendar. It's the year the pendulum completes its arc. Every silent injustice, every manipulated outcome, every lie that found applause instead of correction, it's all returning. And it's not coming back as punishment, it's coming back as balance. For years, the world has watched the wrong people walk away untouched. We've seen the honest ones sit in the shadows while the shameless ones basked in borrowed light. People who sacrificed, who loved with both hands, who stood by others through fire, found themselves abandoned, left wondering if doing right was even worth it. And the ones who took, who twisted, who betrayed without blinking, they kept winning until now. You see, karma is not interested in theatrics. It's not fueled by rage or resentment. It doesn't chase and it doesn't rush. It waits for the moment when the lie can no longer hold its shape, when the image begins to peel, when the mask it tolerated for years finally slips. That's what this year holds. It's not about explosions, it's about exposure. And exposure, when it comes from truth, is irreversible. This isn't about watching others fall, it's about watching the truth rise. For years you carried weight that wasn't yours. You bore silence in rooms that didn't deserve your presence. You watered relationships that only grew weeds. And you thought that maybe, just maybe, you were the one who didn't understand how the game was played. But you did. You just refused to cheat. You refused to become what hurt you. And when you feel hurt, you just refuse to cheat. You refuse to become what hurt you. And though it cost you time, tears, and pieces of your own belief in people, you stood still. You held your ground while the world applauded the loud, the cruel, and the clever. But this year, stillness speaks. This year, the silence you've lived in becomes the thunder that echoes back. The quiet ones, the kind ones, the ones who lost with dignity. They rise, not by force, but by inevitability. Because the pendulum doesn't swing back to ask permission. It returns because it must. They thought they were building futures, but all they were doing was borrowing time. The promotions they gained by stepping on others, the relationships they forged through deception, the sympathy they harvested from half-truths. It's all on a timer, and the alarm is ringing. Not in chaos, but in clarity. Suddenly, eyes begin to open. Stories begin to change. Those who were once praised without question now find questions in every corner. The hands that clap for them grow cold, and the rooms that welcome them begin to close their doors. This is what balance looks like. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just precise. Because karma doesn't destroy, it reveals. It doesn't scream, it whispers at the perfect volume. And when it comes, it doesn't knock twice. You won't need to act. You won't need to correct the lies they told about you or explain the moments they misunderstood you. Life will do it for you. Because the same world that watched you be misjudged will now see you in full light. The same rooms that once closed off will seek you out. Not because you fought for them, but because you became undeniable. That's what happens when you survive the storm without becoming it. You didn't retaliate when you could have. You didn't expose what you knew. You let them write their version of the story. And now you get to watch the real ending unfold, not written by your hands, but by time itself. This isn't a speech for the bitter. This is a moment for the patient, for the people who refuse to break even when it would have been easier, for the ones who let others talk while they chose to observe, for those who chose peace over petty. Your season is here. You are not forgotten. You were never behind. You were simply aligned with something deeper. And now that alignment meets its reward. The pendulum has swung back, and it does not apologize for its return. It brings no warning, only truth. And truth, once it arrives, does not leave quietly. False thrones will crumble. There are people walking this earth who built their identities on illusion. Not on character, not on principle, but on perception. They polished their image like it was currency, paraded their charm like armor, and stood atop fragile thrones held together by borrowed credit, forced loyalty, and rehearsed sincerity. And for a time it worked. They fooled the rooms, convinced the crowds, manipulated the narrative so well they began to believe it themselves. They wore masks that smiled wider than the truth ever could. But what they never understood was this: when you build a throne out of lies, it cannot hold the weight of time. Sooner or later it crumbles. Not in a burst, but in a series of quiet, undeniable fractures. And 2025 is the year the fractures become impossible to hide. The applause begins to fade, the spotlight flickers, and the throne they thought was eternal begins to collapse beneath the weight of everything they tried to conceal. People once praised them, called them leaders, visionaries, partners, heroes. But what they truly were architects of smoke. They built images out of admiration they hadn't earned. They used others like stepping stones and called it destiny. They twisted facts until they became fiction and used charm as a weapon against clarity. And while they were performing, others were hurting. While they smiled at cameras, someone was behind the scenes, picking up pieces they shattered. For a while they had power, but power gained through manipulation has a timer, and that timer has run out. Because truth doesn't die. It sleeps. It bides its time. It waits until the very moment when the cost of the lie outweighs the benefit, and then, silently, without fanfare, it begins to unravel everything. This year the unraveling begins. Slowly at first, a few raised eyebrows, a few brave voices daring to speak. Then the patterns emerge, the same stories, the same inconsistencies, the same wounds left on too many people who were told to be quiet. And suddenly the audience that once believed without question begins to ask questions that can't be dodged. The admiration that once protected them begins to turn cold. This is not coincidence, it's correction. Because false thrones were never built to last, they were built to distract. And distraction has a short lifespan. Now, the people they used, ignored, or betrayed, people who once sat in silence, are no longer willing to be quiet. Not with vengeance, not with rage, but with reality, with lived truth. And truth is louder than performance. It doesn't matter how carefully they curated their story, how many people they won over, how many titles they collected. When the foundation is built on manipulation, it does not survive scrutiny. This year, scrutiny arrives not like an attack, but like daylight. It doesn't need to accuse, it only needs to illuminate. And what has been kept in shadow for so long can no longer survive that light. The excuses, the blame shifting, the emotional smokescreens, they stop working. People begin to remember. The spell breaks. And what's left is not the image they tried so hard to protect, but the character they never bothered to build. That's when the throne starts to collapse. And if you've ever been on the other side of their illusion, if you've ever been made to doubt yourself while they twisted the narrative, if you've ever been discarded like a tool once you'd served your purpose, this year you watch the story turn. You don't have to seek revenge. You don't have to speak first, because life has a way of doing what we thought we'd never see. The downfall of those who climbed using the bones of others. You won't need to point fingers. The evidence will speak. The silence that once protected them will break. And not because you forced it, but because it was always going to happen. You just lived long enough to witness it. There's a justice that comes not with anger but with clarity, a peace that settles in when you realize the people who tried to rise by pretending to be more than they are cannot hold their position when the weight of truth sets in. You don't have to outshine their performance, you just have to remain who you are, grounded, honest, and whole. Because the world is shifting. The hearts of people are shifting, and the craving now is for authenticity, not artifice. The crowd doesn't want another actor. They want someone real. And that's where they lose their grip, because real was never part of their plan. So let the throne fall. Let the applause stop. Let the image collapse under its own emptiness. You don't have to celebrate their fall, but you can find peace in the fact that it's happening, not because you demanded it, but because karma doesn't keep false kings on borrowed thrones. It reclaims the ground they stood on. And when it does, the ones who remained quiet, patient, and honest will finally rise, not to build new thrones, but to walk freely, without the weight of anyone's shadow. Because 2025 is not just the year things fall apart. It's the year truth finally takes its rightful seat. Silence wasn't weakness, it was precision. They thought you were finished when you stopped responding. They mistook your silence for surrender, your distance for defeat. They assumed the quiet meant you had nothing left to say, nothing left to fight with. But what they never understood, what they still don't understand, is that silence isn't always the sound of retreat. Sometimes it's the breath before the arrow flies. Sometimes it's not the absence of power, but the mask, because there's a difference between those who go silent because they are broken and those who go silent because they are sharpening. And you? You weren't retreating. You were recalibrating. You were learning, observing, collecting pieces of truth while they kept spinning lies. While they danced in the noise, you stood in the stillness. And now they'll understand that silence isn't the end of the story. It's the setup for a return they'll never see coming. They fed off your reactions. Every time you defended yourself, every time you explained your intentions, every time you tried to bring clarity into chaos, they used it, twisted it, mocked it. You were speaking into a void where truth didn't matter, where logic didn't land. where empathy was a foreign language. So one day you went quiet, not because you didn't care anymore, but because you realized they didn't. And in that moment, a transformation began. You stopped trying to be understood and started becoming unshakable. You stopped showing up to arguments dressed in peace, hoping they'd recognize it. You let the chaos rage on without you. You chose dignity over drama, not because you were weak, but because you were done bleeding for people who never brought a bandage. They don't know what it cost you to stay silent. The things you could have said, the truths you could have released, the character you could have dismantled with one sentence. But you held it, not because you couldn't destroy, but because you refused to become what hurt you. You knew that anything born from bitterness carries a poison that eventually reaches the one who birthed it. So you buried your pride, swallowed your rage, and sat with the weight of everything you didn't say. And while they thought you were fading, you were actually becoming something stronger, something calmer, more deliberate, more dangerous in a way that doesn't seek destruction but becomes immune to it. And now, in 2025, that silence speaks louder than words ever could, because everything that once needed defending is beginning to defend itself. The narrative they built is cracking, not because you tore it down, but because lies can only stand unsupported for so long. People are beginning to see the contradictions. They're noticing how your story never changed, while theirs constantly shifted. They're realizing that the person who stayed quiet wasn't avoiding the truth. They were the truth. And now, without saying a word, you're being heard. Not through explanation, not through argument, but through alignment. Life is aligning the facts, the timelines, the patterns. And in that alignment, your silence becomes the evidence. They thought you didn't have the strength to speak. What they never considered was that your strength was in not speaking. That your decision to withhold, to walk away, to detach from dysfunction, was not passive, it was powerful. Because it takes more courage to choose your peace over proving your point. It takes more strength to leave a battlefield you could have dominated. It takes more wisdom to trust that time will reveal what manipulation tried to hide. And now time has arrived and it's holding a mirror. Let them face what they tried to bury. Let them sit in the silence they once used against you. Because the difference now is that you're no longer wounded by their distortion. You're no longer chained to their chaos. You don't need revenge. You've outgrown the need to be understood by the very people who built their identity on misunderstanding you. You don't owe anyone a performance, not anymore. The performance is over, and the curtain has fallen on the illusion. And what remains, what survives, is truth, unshakable, undeniable, unapologetic. So let them talk, let them wonder, let them scramble for the narrative now that you've withdrawn your energy, because the moment you stopped explaining was the moment you took your power back, not in rage, not in noise, but in restraint. That's the kind of power that doesn't just walk away, it elevates. It doesn't slam the door, it walks through it. With such calm that even the door questions who it was made for. This year your silence will echo, not as defeat, but as authority, not as absence, but as presence. They'll feel it in the places they once used to manipulate. They'll hear it in the spaces where they expected applause. And they'll realize that the person they thought they silenced was just choosing the perfect moment to let truth speak for itself. 2025 is not the year you raise your voice. It's the year your silence becomes the loudest thing in the room. The mirror turns around. You see, for the longest time, they stood behind you, watching, judging, dissecting every step you took. but never from their own reflection. They threw their criticisms like knives, their judgments like chains, and their assumptions like gospel. And all the while, they never once held a mirror to themselves. They made you believe that the problem was always you, that if there was conflict, you had started it. If there was silence, you had caused it. If there was distance, it was your coldness, your inability, your flaw. They lived in a world where accountability was foreign and projection was fluent. But what they never saw coming, what 2025 now brings, is that the mirror turns. And when it does, it doesn't lie. It shows them everything they spent years avoiding. And this time, there's no one left to blame but themselves. They made a habit out of distortion. They mastered the art of shifting guilt, of being the wounded in every war they secretly started. They wore the mask of the misunderstood while they broke hearts quietly and blamed the cracks on the ones trying to hold everything together. They were magicians of manipulation, always making truth disappear while leaving behind illusions that served their version of the story. But here's the thing about illusions. They don't last. They can hold an audience for a while, yes, but eventually even the most captivated crowd starts to see the strings, and this year, the strings are snapping. Because life, in its strange and perfect rhythm, always turns the mirror back around, not to punish, not even to embarrass, but to restore order. The mirror reveals not just the surface, but the residue of choices, the echoes of words spoken in rage, the patterns of destruction they pretended not to notice. It shows the relationships they sabotaged, the loyalty they betrayed, the kindness they took advantage of. And most of all, it shows them that what they blamed you for was never yours to carry, that the pain they claimed you caused was the very pain they handed you with a smile, again and again. And you spent nights questioning yourself. You replayed every conversation, trying to find where you went wrong. You edited your memory to accommodate their excuses. You shrank yourself to fit into the picture they painted of you. But no more, because now the light is shifting and the picture is changing. You're beginning to see clearly not just who they were, but who you were in spite of them. You weren't difficult. You were discerning. You weren't cold. You were cautious. You weren't the villain. You were the mirror they refused to face. And now, life is holding up that same mirror in front of them. And there's no turning away. They'll try, of course. They'll deflect. They'll cling to the story where they were always the victim, always the one who tried their best. But the mirror doesn't entertain narratives. It reflects truth. It's quiet, still, but undeniable. And when the truth reflects long enough, even the most persistent denials begin to crack. The world they constructed so carefully starts to collapse. Not with thunder, but with silence. Suddenly, the same tactics that once won them sympathy now earn them questions. The charm that used to disarm now feels forced. The words they once used to twist reality now hang in the air, revealing their emptiness. That's what happens when the mirror turns. And you, who once stood accused, misunderstood, and emotionally exiled, you no longer need to defend your side. You are no longer standing in their shadow, trying to explain your light, because the truth has its own legs now. It walks into rooms before you do. It fills in the blanks you no longer need to answer for. And the people who once looked at you with suspicion, who doubted your heart, who bought into the performance, they are now beginning to see, not because you told them, but because they're finally watching what happens when the mirror faces the one who always turned it outward. This is your peace. Not revenge, not exposure, just peace. the peace of knowing that you didn't have to destroy them to be free from them. You didn't have to drag them into the light found them, and the mirror, it did the rest. And you just kept walking. You healed without applause. You grew in the silence. You rose in the absence of validation. And now, while they face what they once projected, you are simply living, no longer explaining, no longer shrinking, no longer waiting to be seen. Because in this new season, the truth stands on its own feet, and it looks a lot like you. 2025 is not about proving who you are. It's about watching who they become when the mirror no longer hides their reflection, when the consequences of their actions no longer land at your feet, when they finally see the version of themselves they made you carry. And when that moment comes, don't say a word. Don't offer comfort. Don't offer commentary. Just stand in your clarity. The mirror has turned, and the truth, unlike the lie, needs no defense. You don't need to fight, you've already won. There's a quiet strength in realizing that you don't have to fight for what's already yours. For so long you've been caught in the idea that justice needed a battle, that victory required a struggle, that peace had to be earned through conflict. But here's the truth that 2025 brings. There are some things that don't require a fight. Some things, like your worth, your dignity, your right to peace, they can't be taken from you. They can't be worn down, shaken, or diminished by the chaos that others bring into your life. You've already won. Not because you stood in the ring and fought tooth and nail, but because you chose to stand on the ground of truth. And truth, my friend, is always undefeated. You've spent years trying to explain, trying to clarify the misunderstandings, trying to correct the assumptions, trying to outshine the shadows they cast on you. But what you didn't realize was that the fight was never yours to begin with. You were only fighting because they led you to believe you needed to. They made you think that silence was submission, that patience was weakness, that peace was a sign of surrender. But in reality, the quiet strength you carried was your weapon. The way you refused to lower yourself to their level, that was the victory. The fact that you didn't retaliate, didn't lash out, didn't lose yourself in the chaos, that was your triumph. Because when you refuse to be consumed by the mess others make, you walk away as the one who never lost control. And that is the highest form of victory. What they never understood, what they never cared to see, is that your strength wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about proving it to yourself. It was about standing firm in your values, in your truth, in the integrity that no one could take from you. While they were busy fighting for applause, for validation, for the fleeting wins of the moment, you were investing in something deeper, something that doesn't fade with time. And now, in 2025, everything you've built, every lesson you've learned, every silent moment of reflection, every time you chose peace over drama, becomes the foundation of the life you're living now. You didn't need to fight, you just needed to evolve. And now the battle is over, and you are standing in your victory, not with weapons drawn, but with a quiet, unshakable confidence that comes from knowing the truth will always have its day. And the truth is this: everything that was taken from you in the past, everything that was withheld, everything that was twisted to diminish your worth, it was never yours to fight for. It was never yours to chase. It was always meant to return to you in its own time. The people who tried to break you, they never had the power. The situations that tried to define you, they never had the control. The betrayals you experienced, they were never the end of your story, but the catalyst for your growth. You didn't need to fight for your worth. You didn't need to scream your value into the wind. You just needed to be, and in being, you've already won. Now, as 2025 unfolds, the world begins to catch up to what you've always known. The people who underestimated you, the ones who walked over you, the ones who took your kindness for weakness, they are seeing the truth. Not because you've pointed it out, but because they are starting to see it for themselves. The applause they once sought, the praise they tried to manufacture, they're realizing it's empty without substance. The battles they fought to rise to the top are being overshadowed by the quiet power of your resilience. They fought for moments. You fought for the life behind those moments. And now, when all the noise dies down, when all the smoke clears, it's your life, your peace, your truth that stands in the spotlight. And that, my friend, is a victory no one can take from you. You don't have to look back anymore. You don't have to chase after what's already yours. There's no need for explanations, no need for justifications. The people who need to understand will understand in time. The people who need to see your worth will see it. And the people who spent their energy trying to undermine you, they'll fade into the background, because they were always playing for an audience that didn't matter. You've always known this. You were never playing for their applause. You were playing for your own peace, your own fulfillment, and your own sense of self. And now, as 2025 unfolds, you realize something even more profound. You've already reached the destination. You've already won. The fight? It was always in your mind, and now your mind is at peace. So stop looking over your shoulder, stop wondering if they'll get what they deserve, stop questioning whether your sacrifices will ever be acknowledged. You've already won. You've already outlasted the battles they tried to bring you into. You've already proven that your worth cannot be measured by their standards, their praise, or their approval. And the most powerful part of it all, you never had to lift a finger. The victory was never in the struggle. It was in your refusal to give up on who you were. It was in your unwavering decision to stand tall, even when the world was trying to break you down. 2025 is not the year of fighting for your place in the world. It's the year of standing in it. Standing in the knowledge that you are enough, that you are worthy, that you are deserving of peace and success. You've already won the war. Now you're simply walking in the victory that is rightfully yours.